Reason number 3. The record clearly shows these were good, simple, highly moral, honest men. There's nothing in their lives that even hints at the fact that they were somehow cunning, conniving liars. In fact, they weren't even lawyers. No offense intended to the legal profession. And think about what these otherwise simple men wrote. Their letters have actually been compiled into the Bible as a book that has staggered some of the most brilliant and moral minds and lives in history. And they not only wrote about and preached about a resurrected Christ, they lived their lives in his resurrection power. So ask yourself, if you dare, how is it that men who were common sinners became the morally elite of their day virtually overnight? And nothing proves sincerity like martyrdom. So you also have to ask yourself, how is it that every single one of these disciples of Jesus, who before the event of the claimed resurrection were running and scattering to protect their own skins, and then afterwards, they each became martyrs for the cause. They each, every last one of them, willingly died brutal, painful, and very otherwise avoidable deaths for what they believed in. And I know what the objection is when some people hear that. They point to the recent September 11th events or events like those. And they point to religious fundamentalists dying for what they sincerely believed in. But I encourage you to go and read the accounts of such wicked men's so-called martyrdom. And you will find, virtually without exception, that such men who die for false religions are men who have led wicked lives that betray their claims of relationship with God. In fact, less than 24 hours before several of those terrorists boarded the aircraft that they intended to fly into the World Trade Center, many of those men were spending their final night breaking their own religious creeds by drinking and carousing in strip clubs. So it always is, because what is inside a man eventually comes spilling out. And what was inside of those disciples of Jesus who gave their lives for what they knew to be true? Well, it was moral purity to the highest degree, because their lives showed it in word and in deed. And I want you to use your minds and your sense of perspective here. Imagine 12 poor, fearful, not particularly sharp peasants literally turning the entire civilized Roman world upside down with a supposed lie. A lie that they allegedly knew was untrue. And a lie that was not a very easily digested or attractive lie at that. I mean, if you're going to pick a lie that you know is going to cost you your freedom and your social acceptance and eventually your life, one would think that you would pick a lie that was more personally beneficial. As Thomas Aquinas once said,
"In the midst of the tyranny of the persecutors, an innumerable throng of people, both simple and learned, flocked to the Christian faith. In this faith, there are truths proclaimed that surpass every human intellect, because it teaches the exact opposite of what man naturally believes. It is a message where the pleasures of the flesh are curbed. It is taught that the things of the world should be spurned. Now for the minds of mortal men to assent to these things at all is the greatest of miracles. But this wonderful conversion of the world to the Christian faith is the clearest witness that something divine was at the source of it. For it would be truly more wonderful than all miracles if the world had been led by simple and humble men to believe such lofty truths, to accomplish such difficult actions, and to have such high hopes, much less for it to have all been based on a lie."
reason number 4. What was their motive for this supposed lie anyway? I mean, can you think of a rational one? Lies are always told for some kind of selfish advantage. But what advantage came from this lie? I'll tell you the advantage they got. They were hated, scorned, persecuted, excommunicated, imprisoned, tortured, exiled, crucified. even boiled alive, roasted, beheaded, sometimes dismembered, fed to the lions. Not exactly a bonus package. Reason number 5. If the resurrection really was a lie, the religious leaders of the day would have produced a corpse in a heartbeat to squelch the rumors and nip this fear and superstition that was literally wreaking havoc in their synagogues. And they would have nipped it in the bud. All they would have had to do was to walk over to the tomb and produce the body that was inside. And the Roman soldiers and the government would have gladly cooperated. So it would have been no problem at all. They all had great personal reasons and incentives to do so. So why didn't they? I'll tell you why. There was no body to get, which is why people who are desperate to cling to one of these theories usually claim next that the disciples must have taken the body. But if the disciples supposedly stole the corpse, we're immediately confronted with the same kind of dilemma. How in the world did they do that? The same problems Jesus would have had in taking on the military elite Green Beret of the Roman Army Guard, the disciples would have had. And we already showed that idea was complete nonsense. So that idea doesn't work either. Reason number 6. As Scripture itself says on this subject, this thing, the resurrection, was not done in a corner. It was one of the most highly visible, easily verifiable events that was happening in the Middle East at the time. Now, these biblical streets are quiet right now, but to suggest that this ragtag bunch of 12 disciples could have gotten away with such a blatant lie in the bustling streets of Jerusalem, a place that was packed with very interested third-party witnesses, is nothing short of absurd. As William Craig put it,
the Gospels were written in such temporal and geographical proximity to the events they record that it would have been almost impossible to fabricate them. The fact that the disciples were able to proclaim the resurrection in Jerusalem in the face of their enemies a few weeks after the crucifixion shows that what they proclaimed was true, for they could have never proclaimed the resurrection and been believed under such circumstances had it not occurred.
And reason number 7. If there had been a conspiracy, it would have certainly been sniffed out and exposed by the disciples' enemies, who had both the power and the desire to blow the whistle on any fraud. So, to more or less sum it all up, if the resurrection was nothing more than a lie, a conspiracy, concocted by a group of liars, well, then it violates every known law in the universe pertaining to the history and psychology of lying. In other words, it just doesn't wash. In fact, it's infinitely more unscientific and full of fantasy than any claim of the resurrection ever was. And unlike the resurrection, it flat out contradicts the facts. So, 2 down, 2 to go.
Due to broadcast restrictions, this program will continue at the same time next week, where we'll discuss the final 2 theories. First, the hallucination theory.
If you were walking down the street and you thought you saw, right before your eyes, ex-President Richard Nixon standing right in front of you, talking and acting just like any other person, wouldn't you think there was a far better chance that you had seen a hallucination than that you were actually seeing correctly? I think that's a fair statement, since Richard Nixon died in 1994. So then why not think the same thing about Christ's resurrection? Well, let me give you 8 good reasons.
Which will include the number of people who saw the resurrected Christ, the time and place the resurrected Christ was seen, the length of time the resurrected Christ was seen, the number of times the resurrected Christ was seen, the interaction with the resurrected Christ, as well as the empty tomb.